A live look right now in Southern California. President Trump set to tour the decimated Pacific Palisades this hour. This morning, also vowing not to forget battered North Carolina, and throughout the day questioning why we need FEMA. That's topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
My mother was trapped in the house, and there was no way to escape because the water got so high.
We just lost everything that we had. Didn't even have a brush for like 3 days.
Our house was 25 feet underwater.
So you didn't think you were going to live?
No, we were watching houses, trailers, bodies.
A day of firsts for the new top two. President Trump coast to coast tonight. His first domestic trip focusing on two devastations. We are awaiting the president's arrival into LAX, where the president is landing at this moment. He will then tour the devastation in the Pacific Palisades. The president today also outlining conditions for likely federal aid in California, saying that could come in exchange for water management, even voter ID protections.
FEMA's turned out to be a disaster. And I think we're going to recommend that FEMA go away. And we pay directly, we pay a percentage to the state.
And this morning, the president visiting Asheville, North Carolina, which experienced historic flooding in Hurricane Helene. The president vowing to shake up FEMA, as you heard there, possibly even eliminating the department as part of his administration's new changes.
I want more babies in the United States of America. And it is the task of our government to make it easier for young moms and dads to afford to have kids, to bring them into the world.
That, of course, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, in his first solo appearance today, speaking before thousands of pro-life advocates at the National March for Life rally here on the National Mall. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. We have heard from lawmakers from both California and North Carolina, both Democrats and Republicans here on the Hill in recent weeks. They have launched complaints about FEMA. We've asked them about it. They've told us it. Tonight, here's what we wanted to do. You will hear from both states, both sides of the aisle, on what's happening at home and what should and shouldn't come next. The North Carolina Congressman Chuck Edwards and the Democrat from California, Ami Bera, will join us here on the Hill in a moment. Brian Enton is live in the Tar Heel State, but we begin tonight with our Nancy Liu in the Pacific Palisades awaiting the president's arrival. Nancy?
And Blake, we're expecting President Trump on the ground here in Pacific Palisades in about an hour or so. And there is just so much devastation here for him to see. It's hoped that seeing it firsthand might sway his opinion about recovery aid for Southern California. Now, after landing at LAX, where there's suspense here about what's going to happen when he's greeted by California Governor Gavin Newsom on the tarmac there. The president from LAX is going to be heading for an aerial tour of all the devastation. So many neighborhoods wiped out, house after house that's just gone, thousands of families now without a home. And I believe we see Gavin Newsom there waiting on the tarmac for the president to deplane. Now, here in the Palisades, the president will be joined by Mayor Karen Bass and other lawmakers to tour a neighborhood. And notably absent from the list, Blake, is Governor Gavin Newsom. He won't be here in the Palisades. So it'll be interesting to see what happens later on when the president gets here to the Palisades, Blake.
Nancy Liu down the road in Pacific Palisades there in Los Angeles as we take a live look there at LAX and what the sight that is. Air Force One just landing moments ago, carrying the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and there had been some questions about how all of this would unfold. And as we see there, the lone person, at least for the moment, there at the tarmac, willing and there greeting President Trump when he comes down the stairs there of Air Force One. The California Governor, Gavin Newsom. Those two have quite the relationship, to put it mildly, and it appears as if, not it appears, those two will definitely be seeing each other eye to eye momentarily. As we keep those live pictures up, it has been 119 days since Hurricane Helene devastated Asheville, North Carolina, and towns nearby in the western part of the state. 104 people died from the hurricane in the Tar Heel State. Almost 13,000 Western North Carolina households have used FEMA's traditional sheltering assistance program. The estimated total damages believed to be $60 billion. Now, FEMA so far has provided more than $316 million in grants to Western North Carolina, including more than $6 million in rental assistance. That's where the president began his day, noting how it's the first stop of his presidency.
That message is very simple. You are not forgotten any longer. You were treated very badly by the previous administration, and I'm here.
Our Brian Enton live in Swannanoa, North Carolina, just down the road there in Asheville with the very latest. Brian?
Yeah, Blake, what President Trump said, I mean, a lot of people here, politics totally aside, have just felt totally forgotten for the last 4 months. They felt like the federal government has been ignoring them. You had the FEMA stats, but you get out here on the streets and there's a lot of people who say there's just too much red tape and they've gotten basically no help from FEMA. And this is what it still looks like here, Blake, 4 months later. A lot of businesses and homes still washed out. You can see the bridge over here. They've been working to rebuild, but there's still a lot of debris in the way. People here feel like they are finally getting noticed and that they might finally get the help they need. Take a listen to what a few people told us today.
FEMA hasn't done that much, so whatever works, it don't really matter. We need the roads and bridges and stuff fixed around here.
Seems like it's just been people helping people, not so much the government helping.
We were day one, and I'm going to cry. That's what we hillbillies do. We're hillbillies, and we hit the ground running.
And in terms of just getting rid of FEMA, Trump's idea, Blake, it seems somewhat popular with the people that I've spoken to. They feel like the state government has a better handle on things, understands the area better, understands all the little cultural things from this area. You know, every place has different things about it, and they feel like the state would do a better job controlling the money and getting the aid out. Blake?
Interesting. Our Brian Enton live for us tonight in Western North Carolina. Brian, thank you. So, as he mentioned, what comes next for FEMA? And for these two states whose residents still need help at this moment and will for quite some time. The Federal Emergency Management Agency started in 1979 during the Carter administration, after the Department of Homeland Security formed as a response to the September 11th terrorist attacks. FEMA then folded into DHS not long after, in 2003. Right now, its budget, roughly $33 billion, the majority of that going to the Disaster Relief Fund and National Flood Insurance Program. But as we have seen recently, that's just the start. Congress, for example, passed an additional $100 billion in aid after this past summer's hurricanes, while the devastation in California is expected to potentially be several hundreds of billions of dollars. The president says it is time for an overhaul of some kind for FEMA.
I'll also be signing an executive order to begin the process of fundamentally reforming and overhauling FEMA, or maybe getting rid of FEMA. I think, frankly, FEMA is not good.
Joining me now is a Democratic congressman from California, Ami Bera, once again with us live here on the Hill. Congressman, thanks for being with us. I don't know if you can see the screen there, but we're focused on the door on Air Force One. Just down the steps is your governor, the California Governor, Gavin Newsom. As we look live right now here on NewsNation, the First Lady, Melania Trump, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, on the ground in L.A., Congressman. And as we follow the president down the stairs there is going to be a handshake and a greeting with Gavin Newsom. What do you make of it, sir, and what do you want the governor to tell him?
You know, Blake, thanks for having me on. I'm glad that the governor's there meeting the president. I'm glad the president is out here in California. Look, this isn't a time for politics, and yeah, they've had their battles before, but this is a time to help Americans and help folks devastated by these fires. So I'm glad they're talking, and it looks like it's a cordial conversation.
You know Gavin Newsom. What do you think he's telling them?
I do. I was his congressman for a while. I think he's moved down to Los Angeles now, but I hope they're just talking about the people that are suffering and how they could work together to get aid.
Congressman, I'm sorry to jump you here, but let's listen live together because it looks like the two will speak together.
North Carolina, a little while ago, we have that in very good shape. We have the congressman in charge and Michael Watley, and we're going to do a lot of work. We have the Army Corps of Engineers working as they are here, and I think you're going to see some very big progress. They left them high and dry, and now we're going to be taking a little tour with some of the people from the area. I appreciate the governor coming out and meeting me, Kevin, very much, and we'll be talking a little bit. We want to get it fixed. We want to get the problem fixed, and there'll be some ways, but it's like you got hit by a bomb, right?
Yeah.
Like you got hit by a bomb. Would you like to say something?
Most importantly, thank you for being here. It means a great deal to all of us, not just the folks in Palisades, the folks in Altadena that were devastated. We're going to need your support. We're going to need your help. You were there for us during COVID. I don't forget that. And I have all the expectations that we'll be able to work together to get this speedy recovery.
We will. We've got to get it done. Tremendous numbers of lives have been affected. A lot of real estate's been affected. Nobody's ever probably seen anything like this. You can almost say since the Second World War, when you think of it. I mean, nothing like this has happened. And we're going to get it fixed, so we'll get it permanently fixed so it can't happen again. And again, we'll be talking a little bit later, and we'll get it worked out, okay?
I appreciate it, Mr. President.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Both of you have disagreed a lot over the past week over what has happened in this state. How do you plan to
we got to get it finished. We're looking to get something completed, and the way you get it completed is to work together. He's the governor of this state, and we're going to get it completed. They're going to need a lot of federal help. Unless you don't need any, which would be okay.
We're going to need a lot of federal help.
So we're going to take care of things, okay?
I have all the confidence in the world we'll work that out.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. I guess some of you are coming with us, and some of you not. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll see you.
President Trump and the California Governor Gavin Newsom side by side, shoulder by shoulder. Politics can often get petty, but what we just witnessed were two adults in the arena. The president standing there next to the California governor saying that federal aid will be coming, that help will be coming. The California governor thanking the president for being there, saying, you know what, you were with us the last time we needed you, and we know that you will be there with us for this time, as California certainly needs the help. From here, those two, or at least the president, we don't know if the governor will be headed to the Pacific Palisades, but President Trump and the First Lady heading there to tour that area. Let's show the live pictures there of where they were going to be heading, because now they go to a fire station in the Pacific Palisades. The president will be going to that area and touring that area and then getting a briefing there as well. We were speaking with the Democratic congressman from California, Ami Bera, leading into all of this. Congressman, I thank you for being with me and for hanging around here for a moment. That was a fascinating scene. Does it give you hope that these two can work together?
Yeah, Blake, I think it was a very appropriate conversation. There was no politics there. Yeah, there was the request from Governor Newsom, knowing that we're going to need help from the federal government. And President Trump was gracious, understanding that we're all Americans and, that they'll be here to help us.
There is a conversation, Congressman, happening today. The president saying there either needs to be some serious change with FEMA or perhaps get rid of it altogether. And I was struck by the reporting of our Brian Enton on the opposite coast in western North Carolina, the devastation there from the hurricanes. And Brian said that idea is popular among those he spoke with in North Carolina today. They just don't think the government has been there for them. What about that idea, Congressman? Taking a look at FEMA and saying, maybe we get rid of it potentially.
So on the basic premise that emergencies are best handled at the local level, state level, because they know the community is the best, that, I can get behind 100%. Obviously, we'll need some federal help with big disasters. North Carolina will need that help. How do you get those resources more quickly to the governors, to the counties and local governors, governments? I'm open to that conversation. We should figure this out because we're also seeing bigger disasters. You saw the flooding and hurricanes in North Carolina.
Right.
You're seeing freezing cold in Texas and Louisiana, and obviously the worst disaster we've ever seen here in California. So there has to be a better mechanism. And then how do we build back in a better way that's more resilient? What does that look like? So I think we should talk about all of that.
All right. Congressman Ami Bera, Democrat from California, hanging with us through a little bit of breaking news there at LAX. Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Blake.
All right. So still to come here from the Hill, the president says that states should potentially handle their own disasters. Is he right? On the other side of the break, the congressman who represents Asheville, North Carolina, with us live. Plus, JFK, RFK, MLK, and the president ordering the release of their files. What about UFOs? That be next. Stay with us. Welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. 4 months later, and the devastation can still be felt in western North Carolina. Residents recounting what they experienced during Hurricane Helene to President Trump and how their lives have been affected since. Communities there have already lived through the unimaginable, but now survivors are facing a brutally cold winter, for some, without their homes, heat, and other basic necessities. Joining us live here on the Hill is the Congressman Chuck Edwards. He is a Republican who represents Asheville, was with the president today, I believe, traveled down with him in North Carolina. Congressman, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. You were with the president today. He visited your community. What'd you tell him?
First of all, I told him that I was so grateful, and the people here in western North Carolina are so grateful that he kept his promise to us when he came here just a few days after Helene hit western North Carolina, and he told us that western North Carolina would not be forgotten. Today, he and I boarded Air Force One, and on his very first trip as president of this term, he brought that great big plane to western North Carolina and reminded us we were not forgotten.
What is the situation there? The last time we spoke, Congressman, you were telling me about folks who still have no idea what the future holds for them with housing. That was about 10 days ago. Tonight?
Tonight, there's still many folks out there that do not know where they're going to be living. Sometimes from day to day. We've got about 6,000 people staying in hotels for various reasons. And FEMA's communication has just been terrible in terms of the eligibility for them to stay there, to continue to stay there. And in some cases, FEMA has had the audacity to ask people to leave that hotel room inside of 24 hours notice.
So what about this idea from President Trump, if not wholesale changes at FEMA, what about the idea of potentially getting rid of it? Is that something that Republicans in Washington should pursue?
Well, it's certainly a conservative principle, an overriding conservative principle, to have less government. And I believe that that's what the president is suggesting here. I think that when we really sit down and start to put this on a whiteboard, we're going to realize that there are needs for some personnel in Washington, D.C. with FEMA, but we don't need 20,000 folks there to fail the people that they're serving. I believe we should more send the relief money to the states and leave it up to the governors to decide what is best to help their state recover.
I want to play for you something the president said today real quick.
When there's a problem with a state, I think that problem should be taken care of by the state. That's what we have states for. They take care of problems. And a governor can handle something very quickly.
Can your state, though, unilaterally handle a hurricane? I guess, is part of the question and part of the conversation.
Well, I'd like to add that the president just paraphrased the 10th Amendment. It should be the state's responsibility. And there are states, let's admit, there are states that might not have the experience that are necessary to deal with major disasters. That's why there should be maybe a very slim set of personnel in Washington, D.C. to give them the advice and the backing when it is necessary. I also believe that states, knowing that it would become their responsibility, would be far better prepared for the next natural disaster, because now they're trained to sit back on their heels and wait for the federal government to come in. And we've seen what a miserable failure that has been through this disaster.
Chuck Edwards is the congressman from Asheville with the president today on Stop Number One. Thank you for being with us once again tonight here on the Hill. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Want to show you live pictures that I'm told are just coming into us right now. This is the helicopter tour of L.A. There is no good way to get around that town unless you're the commander-in-chief, and he is getting an aerial view of the devastation. He will land in the Pacific Palisades, and as the president speaks and tours L.A., you will watch it with us live here on the Hill. It is 6:30 tonight in Washington, 3:30 out west in Southern California, where the President of the United States, as you are looking live right now, you can see he is over the skies, in the skies of Los Angeles County. The President is taking a helicopter tour to see the scope of the devastation. What you're watching is the view right now from the camera that is following the President. If you look off there to the screen right, off into the distance, maybe you can see a little helicopter flying. That is Marine One, and where the President is at this moment. The internet reception, not the best as you might imagine, but grateful for these pictures anyways, as the president there in California tonight. California, of course, also a border state. And tonight, the White House posting this video. The U.S. Marine Corps on the border assisting U.S. Customs and Border Protection. NewsNation also reporting tonight that Border Patrol agents have distributed more than 500 notices to appear in President Trump's first 3 days back in office. If you compare that to the same time 2 years ago, that's almost 20 times less. President Trump has vowed to end catch and release and has ordered DHS to stop giving out those notices. And a live look, screen right, L.A., screen left, Capitol Hill, where the Senate will be working late into the night. A vote expected around 9 o'clock on Pete Hegseth to run the Pentagon. So far, only 2 Republicans have said they will vote against Hegseth. Now, if that holds, he will become the next Secretary of Defense. The president seemed cautiously optimistic.
Look, whatever it is, he's a good man. I don't know what's going to happen. You never know in those things. But Pete's a very, very good man. I hope he makes it.
Or Joe Khalil live in the hallways of the Capitol with the latest. Joe?
Hey, Blake, I can tell you that Republicans here in the Senate are a little more confident than what you just heard from President Trump there. They feel pretty good. If you were in Pete Hegseth's camp, someone who hopes that he does become the next Secretary of Defense, you're feeling like you're in a good position now. Now, it is significant that yesterday 2 Senate Republicans, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, voted against advancing his nomination. They are going to vote against him today in the final vote. But if you're a betting person, the question that you're asking is, are there 2 more Republicans, in addition to those 2, who are willing to vote no on the man that Donald Trump wants to run the Pentagon? And so far as we can tell, based on every conversation we've had today and yesterday with our Senate Republican sources, the answer to that is really unlikely. This is what Senator Josh Hawley told us when we asked him that question.
But what makes you so confident he'll have a vote?
Well, and who knows, you may lose one more. But I'd be very surprised based on the number of people who have publicly said they're going to support him and the vote in committee. I'd be pretty surprised if we lost an additional vote. I think Leader Thune counts votes for a living. I don't think he'd have this on the floor right now if he thought he was going to lose it.
Now, Blake, there were some questions, some give and take about whether they could maybe not be here over the weekend, which Senate is expected to do, that would require Democrats and Republican leaders to come together, work something out. That did not happen. So they will be here over the weekend, presumably after Hegseth, to vote on Kristi Noem. And then beyond that, you've got a couple more nominations that we have our eye on. I should just mention, the majority of these nominees Trump put forward are getting bipartisan support, the vast majority. There are a handful that are not. Hegseth is going to be in the latter category.
Our Joe Kay, live tonight in the Capitol hallways. Joe, thank you. So with the flurry of week one news involving the president as we watch him over the skies right now of Southern California, perhaps nothing more historic than a decades-old decision. The president calling for the remaining files on the assassinations of President Kennedy, his brother Robert, and the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. be released to the public in the upcoming weeks. I spoke with the Congresswoman Kat Cammack last night, who suggested, why not stop there?
Let's start releasing the Epstein list. That is something that I know every American is very interested in seeing.
You think he's going to do it?
You know, he has talked about it on the trail. I would not be surprised one bit if he released the Epstein files.
Even the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying, quote, now do UFOs. It also comes as the president says a report will be released soon on the drone sightings. Joining me live, Congressman Eric Burlison. He is a Republican from Missouri, member of the Oversight Committee, and gracious to give us his time when he's probably watching some Kansas City Chiefs highlights going into the weekend. But thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill, sir. Sunshine, it is all the new rage here in Washington. What about the decision from the president, and what do you think we'll learn, if anything, from these files?
Isn't it a refreshing moment when an elected official actually does what they campaigned on? This is beautiful. This is underscoring the fact that Donald Trump is the man of the people. He's the people's president, and the people wanted to know what's going on with the JFK files. The people want answers, and the people are sick and tired of having a federal government think that it's the one that's in possession of this. At the end of the day, the government belongs to the people, and the people have a right to know about something so important as what happened to JFK, Martin Luther King Jr., Robert Kennedy.
What about what your colleague?
What
about what your colleague, Congresswoman Cammack, said? What about the Epstein files? Release that?
Absolutely. And as you know, I've been on the Oversight Committee and the UAP task force to try to identify and disclose. In fact, I don't mind saying I've been reaching out to Trump's campaign and to his policy team, trying to get them to consider UFO disclosure.
What have they told you?
Do an executive order on that. And I think that Chuck Schumer, it's one thing I think Chuck Schumer and I can find an agreement on is that the American people, really the world, deserves to know this.
Let me drill down on that. You say you've reached out to the White House about it. What have they told you?
So right now I'm chasing down the proper person, but I've been reaching out to people that are in Trump camp that I know.
So what's your sense? What's your feeling? What happens here with disclosures, transparency, maybe declassification of any kind?
I think Trump he sees himself as the people's president, and I think that if the American people, and there's an outcry for people that want the information, I think that Trump will deliver because he sees his role as working for the American people and not the other way around.
If that is put forward, declassified, a report, whatever, what do you think we would see on that front?
Look, I hope we get some answers one way or the other, but whether we go back to what really happened at Roswell, what if there was any attempts to cover that up. Every event that we've been investigating, that the UFO community has been investigating, I would like to get answers to those events.
I got to leave it there. Congressman Eric Burlison on the House Oversight Committee, Republican from Missouri. Again, thank you for the time, sir. Good luck this weekend.
Anytime.
Yep, you got it. All right.
All
right. Live look, by the way, here in Washington. But I want to show you a view right now of what's going on in California and what happened a little while ago, because we just saw Donald Trump, the president of the United States, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, on the tarmac there in L.A. as we await the president. Any moment now, in the upcoming hour, Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, who joins me live. This is the live video, Chris, of the helicopters there touching down on the ground. That was a fascinating, fascinating moment to see Donald Trump, Gavin Newsom standing side by side, shaking hands.
Made me think about in 1950, Harry Truman and General Douglas MacArthur had a meeting on Wake Island to talk about the dispute between them over the prosecution of the Korean War. And the story is that MacArthur wouldn't land his plane, or Truman, neither of them could decide who would land first because no one wanted to be the one to receive the other one. It ended in failure because they couldn't work out a way to work together. They couldn't figure out a way to work together. And you have the largest state, the governor of the largest state, you have the president of the United States. They have beef with each other, and they have both exploited that beef for their own personal advantage and riling up people in their own parties and getting that stuff. There's a bunch of people dead. There's billions of dollars worth of damage. Who cares?
Right. Just put it aside.
Like, well, and who your feelings aren't what matter here, and the flexing and the status and the stuff is just not. It's not what matters.
The president of the United States on the ground there in Southern California, expecting a briefing now any moment, Chris, later this hour. If and when that happens, we will show it to you live here on The Hill. Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday. You're on the other side of the break with me.
I'll stick around.
Full panel on the other side as well as we leave you with a live look from Los Angeles. The president moments ago here with Gavin Newsom. Full panel when we return.
Can I just say something?
People are talking about NewsNation.
I love your show.
Thank you. Thank you, Errol. I appreciate it.
Much better than CNN.
You'll be back.
No, it's a pleasure.
See what has everyone talking. NewsNation. News for all Americans.
Welcome back here on NewsNation. Live look, Los Angeles, California. That, of course, is Marine One. President Trump has been on the ground in Los Angeles and up in the skies over Los Angeles for about 40 minutes now. He arrived. He met the California governor, Gavin Newsom, on the tarmac. Those two shook hands, the first lady there as well. They shook hands. They spoke privately, had a moment for about 30 seconds with each other. Then they walked over to the cameras, made some statements to the media, took some questions as well. Both men vowing to work together to help California, a state that desperately needs it in the southern part there, especially in Altadena, Pacific Palisades, and other communities as well. Full panel here with me now. Thanks for being with us here on The Hill on NewsNation. Dan Cannonen, former Battleground States Director for both the Biden and Harris campaigns. Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill. Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And Erin Perini is a Republican strategist. Hello to you all as the Commander-in-Chief, the First Lady, step out of Marine One there. They will enter into the presidential motorcade and make their way over to Pacific Palisades. Erin, quite the moment that we witnessed, quite the moments that we've witnessed over the last 40 minutes or so.
That's right. The tarmac exchange. I think everybody's curious who's the best lip reader to figure out what Gavin Newsom was saying to the President of the United States. But this is exactly what we should be seeing. We should be seeing a Democrat governor standing with a Republican president, putting politics aside and addressing the disaster recovery.
I agree. And for me, it brought back 2012 in the middle of a very difficult campaign for the presidency. Superstorm Sandy hits the Northeast, and Chris Christie and Barack Obama put aside everything to get together and work on that recovery. That was bipartisan and important. And as much as I dislike the current president, I have to say that was a good exchange with Governor Newsom that looked sincere. And if they want to get to work together, that's exactly what should happen.
So live pictures there. You can see the Los Angeles Mayor, Karen Bass. This is at the Pacific Palisades, one of the fire stations there. You can see the presidential seal as well. So President Trump will be touring that area. He already got a little bit of an aerial view and will be there at a briefing at the fire department. They will, Julia, if the first 40 minutes leads to some of the upcoming moments, some of the politics will be put aside, but there was a big conversation starting to happen today about the future of FEMA and whether or not it exists just a little bit or goes altogether.
Well, and it comes after President Trump went to North Carolina, where we heard there was so much controversy back and forth about FEMA after Hurricane Helene last year. Look, I mean, it's unclear how President Trump would move ahead on dismantling FEMA if other, states even want that. I'm curious to hear what Republicans from red states think. A red state like Florida, for example, a state that is no stranger to natural disasters and works oftentimes with FEMA and, with their own state agency. But I think it's just unclear how that would happen if enough Republicans would even be on board.
FEMA stood up in the Carter administration in 1979. After the September 11th terrorist attacks, Chris, it then got moved over in 2003 to the Department of Homeland Security. You even have some Democrats, I think of Jared Moskowitz, a Democrat from Florida who ran emergency management in the state of Florida at one point in time, saying, look, we got to pull this thing out of DHS and give it a straight line to the White House. That's a Democrat saying that. I think it goes to show there's a lot of questions here about how to deal with this going forward.
DHS has not been a successful entity in a bunch of different ways. We can talk about the problems with the Secret Service. We can talk about all of the things that this super agency that was supposed to take on all of these different functions has not delivered on the promise. Bigger did not turn out to be better. Can you take it back apart and take those constituent parts and make them better in other places? Maybe, but I would just say this. You have to limit the number of things that you want to do. You come in, you're a new administration, we want to do all this stuff. I'll tell you, you could pick maybe 3 big things. You could pick maybe 3 big things that you wanted to do. You might get 2. Right. But you got to focus and you got to push through. I had forgotten what it was like, but every 20 minutes, are we buying Greenland? Are we abolishing FEMA? Are we doing that? The churn is just enormous. You've got to
fire hose, right?
Yeah, you got to pick. You got to pick what you want to do, and it takes an extraordinary amount of political will. And there's already 50 things that they've talked about doing, any of which would consume a lot of the energy of it.
But I think on the FEMA point, I wouldn't be shocked if we see them circumvent FEMA in some way at this point to get the money more quickly into the recovery hands. And I think for Republicans, when they start to think about whether or not they want to keep this agency of FEMA, I think you're going to look at a Governor Ron DeSantis, who had a bridge collapse after a hurricane that isolated an entire island of Floridians from the mainland and got it back up in 3 days. You can see where disaster recovery, when left to the states, is successful. Can we get the bureaucracy out of the way to get those funds there quickly to be able to do that?
This is missing 2 things, though, because I think it's about the funds, but also the coordinating enterprise that FEMA should provide. And I agree, Chris, DHS is a big agency. It's a behemoth. Maybe getting a straight line to the White House, as Moskowitz suggests, might be better for them. But what FEMA does besides funding is coordinate defense assets, whether it's the Army Reserves, whether it's the National Guard, whether it's maybe EPA on water quality testing. I was at EPA in the BP Horizon spill. There were 17 agencies that had to get funneled in. You don't want the state to have to fight with the entire federal government to get all these agencies to respond to them.
Most of FEMA's budget this year, it's give or take $33 billion. It's something like 85% of it is for the disaster relief program and the National Flood Insurance Program. So if you move that to the states, right, essentially kind of like block grants, I guess, something happens, you give them the money, they administer it. That leaves a very small portion of actual FEMA. Is that where it goes?
To Chris's point, I don't know. I think the fight there and how that plays out with all the other agencies is such a big, not only a bureaucratic, but political nightmare to do. I don't see that happening. But I do think this question of pulling it out of DHS, or at least giving it some additional accountability right to the White House, that's interesting. But at the end of the day, governors are still in charge. When FEMA comes to their state, it is Ron DeSantis. It is Roy Cooper, when it was Roy Cooper, now Josh Stein, who call the shots. FEMA is there to help be their liaison to the federal government, coordinate and deliver funds.
The president also teed up, Julia, a potential fight saying, change voter ID rules in California and change how you handle water in California earlier today. And that could be sort of the start of the negotiation for federal aid.
It could be. And look, we've heard so much about conditioning federal aid quite a bit on Capitol Hill. So he's certainly teeing that up. It was interesting. Earlier this week, I spoke with Congresswoman Young Kim, who has talked about how these aid to California should absolutely not be conditioned. But it seems like we are moving in that direction. I mean, she's a Republican from California, but there's other Republicans from California outside of California that seem to be in favor of that conditioning.
Good luck. You tell people in a disaster-stricken area, you can't have aid until you change your voter registration rules in your state. I mean, look, we're still in, it's astonishing to say we're still in inauguration week. I cannot believe that we're still in it. We've had about 3 Wednesdays this week. And we have to remember, in about 30 seconds, we're going to be thinking about midterms. In about 30 seconds, we're going to be thinking about midterms. California Republican that has to say, well, we'd like to have help, but you have to understand the point of view of my colleagues from other states that say, until we change our voter ID laws, we can't have aid. That will not fly. That will not work.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Before we go, though, I should mention the best Sunday show in the biz.
So good.
Chris Direwalt hosts The Hill Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern on NewsNation. You have?
Looks like we have, according to this monitor, Roger Marshall, senator from Kansas. We've got Chris DeLuzio from Pennsylvania. He's interesting. And Jamie Harrison with an exit interview.
Interesting.
There we go.
There you go.
All right. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, Other Side of the Break. Check Chris out Sunday. Thank y'all. We're right back.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. It is almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon there in Southern California. We're looking live at a firehouse in the Pacific Palisades. President Trump expected to be there any moment now. He's been on the ground in Southern California for about 50 minutes or so. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, we've been watching these movements. It started off with Gavin Newsom there at the airport. They shook hands, they talked, they spoke to the media. He got in the President did in Marine One, surveyed some of the damage, and he'll be speaking here coming up soon.
Yeah, going to also do a tour through the neighborhoods to see some of the blocks that are burned. This is Donald Trump today in North Carolina and today in California, comforter-in-chief.
Yeah.
This past week has been sort of an amazing week of commander-in-chief, of being the president. Now this is a different moment.